A stench at Charing Cross Station. On the damp spring morning of the 10th of May 1927, commuters hurried through Charing Cross Station, one of London's busiest stations. The air was thick with smoke from steam engines and the tang of coal dust. Amid the bustle, a luggage porter wrinkled his nose. Something was wrong. The smell came from a heavy black trunk that had been sitting in left luggage for days. The label said it had been deposited on the 6th of May, but nobody had come to collect it. At first the attendants thought it might contain rotting food, but the stench only grew worse. Finally they summoned the police. When the lock was pried open, those present recoiled. Inside were the decomposing, dismembered remains of a woman, packed inside the trunk with a butcher's precision. Arms, legs, torso and head, each piece wrapped in brown paper and tied up with string, all arranged in the confines of the trunk. The woman's shoes and handbag were also in the trunk. It was grotesque, deliberate, and the start of one of London's most sensational murder cases. Who was she? The body bore no papers, no jewellery, nothing to identify her. But detectives found a clue, a laundry tag. The laundry tag had the name Holt. Following the mark, they traced it to a Chelsea laundry, and then to Mrs. Holt in South Kensington, who was able to identify a picture of the head when shown it. The woman had been her cook and was known to her as Mrs. Rolls. They discovered her true name was Minnie Alice Bonati, a 36-year-old working-class woman with a string of domestic positions. She was known for being a cheerful character, but kept her personal life reasonably private. Later, as the investigation moved on, it became known that she had left her Italian waiter husband and had moved in with a man called Rolls, and had subsequently taken his name. To make extra money, she had turned to prostitution, and she was last seen alive in Sydney Street in Chelsea between 3:45 p.m. and 4 p.m. on Wednesday the 4th of May. By early May, she had vanished without explanation, but now the mystery was solved in the darkest possible way. So now the detectives turned their attention to the trunk. Who had brought it? Police circulated photographs of the trunk, and it was distributed to shops. Eventually, a shopkeeper would recall a man who purchased a large trunk, and a cab driver remembered hauling a suspiciously heavy load to Charing Cross Station, which led the police to Rochester Row in Westminster, where they would find their suspect, John Robinson, a clerk and sometime estate agent, who rented 2 rooms at number 86 Rochester Row in Westminster, where he ran his estate agent business. When Detective Inspector Steele and Detective Sergeant Clark searched the premises on May the 16th, they found the office empty. He had informed his landlord he was struggling financially and left the building around the 9th of May. The police traced Robinson's lodgings in Kennington, but he had already left. They did find a return telegram addressed to Robinson Greyhound Hotel in Hammersmith. This turned out to be for Mrs. Robinson, who worked there. But this would also turn out to be odd. She was not his real wife, because he was still married to someone else when he married her. Robinson had married her while he was still legally married to his first wife, with whom he had 4 children. When Mrs. Robinson learned this, she agreed to help the police by meeting Robinson, as he had requested her to do. On Thursday, May the 19th, she went to the Elephant and Castle in Walworth, accompanied by Chief Inspector George Cornish. Robinson was arrested and taken to Scotland Yard for questioning. He denied any involvement in the killing. He was put on an identity parade, but the shopkeeper, taxi driver and porter all failed to identify him. So he was then released. On a hunch, the duster found in the trunk was washed, and it was discovered the word Greyhound was sewn into it, linking him to the hotel where his wife worked. Investigating further, they returned to the officers Robinson had been using. While searching, they noticed how clean the place was. Every surface is clean. Even the most meticulous cleaner cannot erase everything. In a waste bin, detectives found a matchstick, which was flecked with blood. It was a small clue, but it tied the office to violence. On the 23rd of May 1927, after weeks of interviews and surveillance, police arrested Robinson. He was described as a quiet, unassuming, plain man, yet he now stood accused of the most grisly crime in memory. When Robinson appeared in court, a police inspector gave evidence about a statement Robinson had made. In the statement, Robinson said he had met Mrs. Bonati at Victoria Station and taken her to his office. He then admitted to committing a crime and claimed to have dismembered the victim. He said, "I did it," and cut her up. Robinson gave the police a location of the knife he used, and it was apparently found buried under a tree. The press had a field day. Headlines screamed of the trunk murder. Papers printed sketches of Robinson in the dock, his hair neatly parted, his face expressionless. Crowds gathered at police courts just to glimpse him. Londoners whispered, how could such an ordinary man commit such a crime? At his trial in July 1927 at the Old Bailey, Robinson took the stand. His voice was steady, his story rehearsed. He admitted that he and Minnie Bonati had been together at his office in Rochester Row. They had, he said, arranged a sexual meeting. An argument over money broke out. She attacked him in a rage. He pushed her away, and she fell, striking her head fatally. He claimed panic overwhelmed him, afraid no one would believe it was an accident. He brought a trunk and a knife, cut up the body, put the body parts in the trunk, and left it at Charing Cross. It was sordid, it was shocking, but was it murder? The prosecution called Sir Bernard Spilsbury the most famous forensic pathologist of his age. His reputation preceded him. Juries hung on his every word. Judges trusted his calm authority, and newspapers described him as the Prince of Pathologists. Spilsbury's evidence was damning. Minnie Bonati had not died of a fall. Her injuries told another story. Bruises across her face and chest suggested someone had pinned her down. There was no skull fracture consistent with a fatal blow. Instead, Spilsbury declared she had been asphyxiated, deliberately smothered, or strangled. The dismemberment, he testified, was careful and deliberate, not the panicked act of a man stunned by accident. Spilsbury's voice carried a clinical detachment, but to the jury it rang with certainty. This was not misadventure, it was murder. The case had drawn in some of Scotland Yard's sharpest men, coordinating interviews and evidence gathering. Railway police traced the luggage records. Cab drivers and shop assistants were interviewed in their dozens. The investigation wasn't without controversy. Later files reveal whispers that a detective may have overstepped, passing details to newspapers during the hunt. His pension was even questioned after the case. But what mattered to the public, however, was the speed and precision of the investigation, and within weeks of the grisly find at Charing Cross, a suspect was in the dock. On the 11th of July 1927, the Old Bailey had opened its doors to the packed courtroom. The trial lasted 3 days. Witnesses took the stand. Albert Edward Glass, the cloakroom clerk, was the first to raise the alarm. Divisional Detective Inspector William Steele, as the lead Metropolitan Police officer, he described the grisly scene upon opening the trunk. The taxi driver recalled picking up the man fitting Robinson's description from 86 Rochester Row. Taxi driver's testimony was instrumental in placing Robinson at the scene of the trunk's disposal. The London shopkeeper, a Mr. George Ward, recognised the trunk after police circulated photographs of it in the press. He gave a description of the man that matched Robinson. However, the shopkeeper was unable to positively identify Robinson in court. Robinson's counsel suggested manslaughter. He said the evidence did not justify committing him on a murder charge. The cause of death was mostly medical speculation. The only real account of the incident came from Robinson himself. After confessing, Robinson retracted his initial statement, claiming that Bonati's death was accidental, meaning he hadn't killed her. It was her hitting her head on a coal scuttle, which he claimed killed her, after he'd pushed her.
John Robinson took the stand in his own defence. He admitted to dismembering Bonati's body and disposing of it in the trunk, but maintained his initial confession was coerced. The jury deliberated for barely an hour. The verdict, guilty of murder. The judge, Mr. Justice Swift, donned the traditional black cap. He sentenced Robinson to death. Robinson, pale but composed, showed no outward emotion. Outside, the streets thronged with spectators. Some cheered, others muttered that justice had been swift, almost too swift. Whilst in prison, he wrote some letters, one to his wife and one to his solicitor. Both these letters were suppressed by the prison authorities, as he was not allowed to make allegations against the police. Appeals failed, and on the 12th of August 1927, at Pentonville Prison, John Robinson walked his final steps to the gallows. The newspapers recorded the execution with cold brevity. He went to his death quietly and without drama. For Minnie Alice Bonati, there was no such closure. Buried quietly, her name faded quickly from public memory, overshadowed by the lurid fascination with the trunk and the killer who had packed her into it. The trunk murder entered London folklore. The black trunk itself was later displayed in Scotland Yard's infamous Black Museum, a grim exhibit among murder weapons and relics of crime. Visitors shuddered at the thought of the body once hidden inside. For detectives, the case was a triumph of old-fashioned police work, tracing receipts, cab rides, and laundry marks. For the courts, it was another testament to the influence of Sir Bernard Spilsbury, whose word could condemn a man. And for the public, it was the ultimate true crime story, shocking, sensational, and unforgettable. Nearly a century later, the murder of Minnie Alice Bonati remains a chilling reminder of how violence can lurk behind the most ordinary of faces. John Robinson was no monster in appearance, no master criminal. He was a clerk, a man lost in the anonymity of London. Yet behind his rented office door at 86 Rochester Row, something terrible happened, and it took a matchstick and a laundry mark and the testimony of a pathologist to expose him. Seven years later, on the 17th of June 1934, another chilling tale of a body in a trunk would surface. Brighton, midsummer 1934. The sea air, the gaiety of shore promenades, the hum of holiday voices, all overshadowed by a horror that would grip Britain's imagination. Two trunks, two women, and a trail of lies that would lead to an assize's court, brilliant cross-examinations, and ultimately an acquittal that would haunt investigators for decades. On the 17th of June 1934, William Joseph Vinicum, a railway cloakroom attendant, thought he could smell something foul in the left luggage office of Brighton Station. A check of the office by a railway cloakroom attendant revealed a foul odour seeping from a large plywood trunk. Inside was worse than anyone dared imagine: a dismembered torso, severed from its head and arms. Word travelled fast. A gruesome murder unravelled piece by piece. The next day another suitcase turned up in London's Charing Cross Station containing two legs. The head and arms remained missing. Sir Bernard Spilsbury, the Home Office pathologist, performed the post-mortem. He estimated the victim was a woman in her 20s and about 5 months pregnant. Many questions remained unanswered. In local and national newspapers, the victim was dubbed Pretty Feet, which suggested a woman with delicate ankles and possibly the feet of a dancer. The press circulated all the news the police shared, including the contents from the trunk, in the hopes that they would lead to helping them identify the remains. They showed scraps of the wrapping paper, a partially legible inscribed word ending in Ford, stained rags, and cotton wool soaked through with blood. Investigators from Sussex Police and Scotland Yard reviewed hundreds of missing person files. They checked hospitals and questioned local abortionists. Chief Inspector Donaldson suspected a particular doctor because of what he knew, but he was told to stop focusing on that particular doctor. He also made a public appeal for information. The first crime, what newspapers would start to call trunk crime number one, remained unsolved, and the identity of its victim remains, probably forever, unknown. Meanwhile, the focus shifted to a second trunk and a missing woman, 42-year-old Violette Kaye, also known as Violet Saunders. She'd been a dancer known in London and Brighton circles. Violet vanished after a heated argument with her partner, waiter and bouncer, 26-year-old Tony Mancini, a petty criminal with a record that included theft and loitering. He also went by aliases, one being Tony Notire. They moved to Brighton together in September 1933 and lived at various addresses. Their relationship was tempestuous, with intense arguments often being heard. The press would later record on the 10th of May 1934 at Brighton's Skylark Cafe, where Mancini worked, the couple were overheard quarrelling. A witness claimed a drunk Kaye accused him of being romantically involved with a teenage waitress called Elizabeth Attrell. From that day, Kaye was never seen again, and the following day Mancini told friends she had gone to Paris and gave some of her clothes and belongings to Miss Attrell. The next day, a telegram arrived for Violet's sister. It read, "Going abroad. Good job. Sail Sunday. Will write. Vi," purporting to be from Violet herself. Graphology experts later testified that the telegram used the same capital letter style found in menus that Mancini had written at the Skylark Cafe. It was later proven that the telegram was sent from Brighton that morning, even though Kaye was already dead by then. Violet had suddenly disappeared. Her clothes and personal effects also began to disappear, pawned or even gifted. Mancini had claimed she had gone to Paris. He moved himself into new lodgings at 52 Kemp Street, not far from the station, and rented a trunk which he claimed was for storage. He moved the trunk with her body inside to the new place on the back of a handcart. He then put the trunk at the bottom of his bed, covered it with a cloth and used it as a coffee table, in spite of the smell that had begun to emanate from the corpse bundled up inside it. On the 15th of July 1934, detectives mounting door-to-door inquiries regarding the unknown trunk torso were also following leads around Brighton regarding the missing Violet, and they discovered the locked room at 52 Kemp Street, where Mancini lived. Detectives entered the room and were immediately alerted by the smell. When officers cracked the trunk open that was stuffed in the corner of the room, the revelation stunned them. Inside was Violette Kaye's body, decomposed but intact, curled up among the rags and decay. She had died by a blow to the skull, the body concealed whole, unlike the dismembered first victim. Mancini had fled. His disappearance lasted only days. On the 17th of July, London police arrested him on the outskirts of the city under one of his many aliases, Jack Notaire. He was brought back to Brighton and formally charged with Kaye's murder. Reports said that under questioning, Mancini had professed he had found Violet dead in their flat and panicked, hiding her in the trunk rather than risk refusal of belief because of his criminal record. During the committal hearings, detectives presented men's clothing recovered from Mancini's lodgings. Dr. Roche Lynch, a Home Office analyst, testified that several garments were stained with human blood. He also reported that the post-mortem revealed traces of morphine in Violet's bloodstream, though he could not confirm whether the dose had been lethal.
The trial opened in December 1934 at the Lewes Assizes, presided over by Mr. Justice Branson. The Crown's case was led by J.C. Cassells. On the prosecution team was Quentin Hogg. The defence was argued by Norman Burkitt, KC, whose cross-examinations would become legendary. From the outset, the courtroom was filled with tension. The trunk, the hammer, blood-stained clothes, telegrams and menus were all brought forward as exhibits. Cassells told the jury that Violette was last seen alive on May the 10th and urged them to see the telegram as a deliberate attempt to mislead her family. He focused on Kaye's death by a blow to the head. One witness said Mancini had asked her to provide a false alibi. Other witnesses, friends of Mancini, claimed he'd boasted in the days after the murder of giving his missus the biggest hiding of her life. He quoted conversations attributed to Mancini. "My missus went away after I bashed her." Gerald Gurin, a handwriting expert, testified that the printed capital letters on the telegram matched inscriptions on menus Mancini had penned in the Skylark calf. Other witnesses claimed Mancini had implored friends to provide alibis or bolster his story. Sir Bernard Spilsbury took the stand. He delivered the prosecution's keystone. Violette had died from a severe blow to the head, likely delivered by a blunt instrument, identified as the hammer. His authority and forensic testimony gave the Crown great confidence. But Burkitt was prepared. He dissected every assumption of certainty. He challenged the integrity of the blood analysis. Could it truly be linked to Violette? He questioned whether morphine had contributed and proposed that a fall, potentially while under the influence of drugs, could have caused the head injury. He questioned whether the samples had been properly preserved. He poked at timing, chain of custody, and alternative theories. Perhaps a client or third party had struck her. Perhaps Violette had been vulnerable because of drinking or drug use. In closing, Burkitt appealed to the jury's logic and conscience. No witness had seen Mancini strike the blow. The evidence was circumstantial at best. He urged them to find reasonable doubt. After 5 days of testimony, summing up and drama, the jury retired. On the 14th of December 1934, after deliberating roughly 2 hours and 18 minutes, despite overwhelming evidence for the prosecution against Mancini, they delivered the shock verdict: not guilty. According to press reports, the moment was charged with energy. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. The accused looked relieved, and the courtroom spectators gasped. When the jury's decision was read, it seemed the curtain had fallen for good. Justice, at least in its formal sense, was finished. Mancini stepped out of the dock, a free man, and the trunk murders slipped into legend. 2 haunting entries in the catalogue of Britain's unsolved crimes. But the story refused to rest. Doubt hung in the air like smoke. The once revered Sir Bernard Spilsbury, whose word in court had once carried the weight of scripture, saw his reputation darken. Meanwhile, Norman Burkitt's poised and ruthless defence was mythologized by the press, turned into the stuff of legal folklore. And then, long after the headlines had yellowed and the case had faded from memory, the silence broke. In 1976, Mancini, now old, his life stretched far beyond the courtroom drama that had defined him, sat down with the news of the world. What he revealed was nothing short of explosive. Yes, he said he had killed Violette. His version of events was stark and chilling. He went on to tell of a ferocious quarrel, Violette lunging at him with a coal hammer, a desperate struggle, one strike to her left temple, then panic, concealment, and the body hidden away. And the testimony he once delivered with such conviction lies, every word of it.
So what was going to happen now? Prosecutors debated whether to prosecute him for perjury, but ruled out fresh charges. He could not be retried due to double jeopardy. Once acquitted, a person could not be retried for the same crime under the law at the time. Mancini died in 1989, never having paid a legal price for Violette's death. Violette Kaye, born Violet Saunders, never received legal vindication. Decades later, the Brighton trunk murders are still discussed in tort and criminal law. They speak of a time when forensic science was still finding its footing, when courtroom theatrics could sway juries, and when double jeopardy laws shielded guilty men. The surviving newspaper clippings remind us of how these crimes transfixed a global audience. The voices of 1934, witnesses, pathologists, counsel, ring out in their printed reports. Violette Kaye remains in the ground, her story fractured, half whispered through court transcripts, half hidden by the lies of the man who once stood accused. Tony Mancini lived out his days beyond prison walls, his belated confession raising more questions than it ever answered. He spoke, then left only silence in his wake. And the first woman, the one discovered crammed in the railway station trunk, lingers in mystery. No name, no past reclaimed, just a body without identity, forever suspended between evidence and oblivion. Two women, two trunks, two unfinished stories. Justice never came. All that endures is doubt and the echo of crimes that refuse to die. Thank you for watching or just listening.